The manga opens with a boy reacting in shock to the announcement of a fishing event scheduled for tomorrow. His surprise comes from the fact that he's never fished before, and he doesn't even own any gear. To make matters worse, tomorrow is Sunday. His boss, however, doesn't seem to care. He simply tells him to buy whatever he needs out of his own pocket. We then learn the boy's name, Sanada Shiro. We then see his boss staring back at him in confusion. Shiro asks if he'll at least be paid for the overtime, but the question only seems to confuse his boss even more, and he never gets a real answer. After finishing his shift, Shiro walks home muttering to himself about what a completely despicable black company he works for. No matter how hard he tries, no one is ever satisfied, and no one rewards him for the effort he puts in. To make it worse, the pay is painfully underwhelming. He decides then and there that he's going to find a new job somewhere people might actually appreciate him. With that thought, he plans to go to bed early for once. But suddenly, the atmosphere around him shifts. When he opens his eyes, he's no longer at home. He's standing on worn marble floors, surrounded by towering castle walls, ancient, crumbling stones stretching in every direction. The sight instantly puts him on edge. Alarmed, he looks around and asks himself where the hell he is. Still confused and shaken, he wonders if he somehow ended up in a foreign country or what kind of place this even is. It finally hits him with a ridiculous thought. Did he die from overwork or heat stroke and get reincarnated into another world? He immediately shakes that idea off. That makes no sense. He clearly remembers waking up this morning, meeting his boss, and heading out for the fishing trip. He remembers getting on the boat, casting his line, and catching a flounder. And then everything becomes blurry. The last thing he can recall is the flounder speaking to him and a sudden black hole opening in the sea, swallowing him whole. Shiro slowly comes to a terrifying conclusion: this really might be another world. The thought alone drains him, leaving him shaken and distressed. But he still can't fully accept it. Maybe it's too soon to jump to that conclusion. Maybe there's another explanation. While he's stuck in that spiral of doubt, someone approaches him. He tries to convince himself that maybe this is just some foreign country after all. But that thought is instantly shattered when a spear comes flying toward him and slams into the wall inches from his face. He looks up and sees a group of armored soldiers closing in on him, their intentions clearly hostile. The soldiers raise their spears and corner him, forcing Shiro to lift his hands in surrender. One of the knights declares that martial law is in effect and demands to know if he's a collaborator with the royal army. Shiro can't even process the accusation. He stammers, asking what they mean by a royal collaborator he genuinely has no idea. In a frightened voice, he blurts out that he's just an employee at a black company and begs them not to stab him. One of the guards suddenly flashes a malicious smile. She assures him they're not going to stab or kill him. He's far too valuable for that. The other guards cheer, celebrating the capture and praising their captain. Then one of them lifts her helmet. Underneath is a woman with razor-like teeth, grinning as she tells Shiro to relax. They won't kill him, but whether he stays safe depends entirely on how well he can satisfy them. They seize Shiro by the arm and tell him he's coming with them. He's in no position to resist. As he's dragged along, he notices something strange. Their language sounds completely foreign, yet he can understand every word. And then another detail hits him. Every single knight surrounding him is a woman. As the night women casually talk about what they're going to do with him, Shiro's mind races. If he can just find a single opening, he might be able to escape. He struggles and tries to pull his arm free, shaking with everything he has. But it's useless. Her grip is impossibly tight. One of the night women looks down at him and calmly asks if he just tried to escape. She tells him to relax, while tightening her grip even more. She assures him they won't hurt him as long as he does exactly what they say. But in his head, Shiro can't stop thinking about how strong she is. He couldn't break free at all. A moment later, he's dragged into a prison chamber. And the night women laugh behind him, their voices echoing menacingly. The captain forces Shiro into a humiliating position, while the other night women argue among themselves about whose turn comes next. They lean in close, circling him, commenting on how surprisingly pleasant his hair smells like flowers. They even note how different it is from their own scent. The attention makes Shiro deeply uneasy. Growing impatient, the knight snaps at Shiro to hurry up and obey. She grabs his head and forces him forward, complaining that he's keeping them waiting. The situation becomes intensely uncomfortable for him, and all he can focus on is the unfamiliar scent around him. The entire moment leaves him shaken and deeply uneasy. The smell overwhelms him, and Shiro suddenly throws up. The other night women panic and try to restrain their captain, shouting for her to stop, but it's too late. In a burst of anger, the captain drives her knee straight into Shiro's stomach. Shiro collapses, crying out in pain. The other night women shout at their captain not to damage him, arguing that she's going too far, but the captain coldly insists she barely touched him. She grabs his face and leans in with a vicious glare, furious that he dared humiliate her. In a low, threatening voice, she promises she'll make him regret it until he breaks and begs for forgiveness. The atmosphere turns suffocating. Shiro is strapped down onto a bench. As he lies there helpless, the night women begin casually judging his appearance, talking about his looks and physique like he's an object on display. The comments sting. He can't stop thinking about how freely they belittle him, saying whatever they want without hesitation. And then, an uncomfortable memory surfaces back in middle school, during swim class. He remembers saying similar things about girls himself. Overwhelmed, Shiro quietly apologizes in his heart to an old classmate named Yoshida. Now that he's the one being objectified, he finally understands how cruel his words used to be. The captain continues examining him with cold detachment, speaking as if he's nothing more than a tool. She assures the others they don't need to worry, she has a method to keep him useful for as long as they want. Hearing that, Shiro forces a weak smile and wonders if he'll ever make it back to his own world. A world without whatever nightmare this is. And then one word cuts through his thoughts. Magic. He freezes. The captain raises her palm and it begins to glow. The captain grips his head and announces that this is where the real fun begins, telling him to brace himself. A sudden surge of light shoots through his body, racing from his mind downward in a violent flash. Shiro cries out in shock, his entire body jolting from the sensation. Watching calmly, the captain smiles and says they're all set. In a cheerful tone, she asks if he isn't excited for what comes next. Shiro realizes he can't do anything but stare, frozen in place. In his mind, he blames everything on that cursed flounder that dragged him into this world. Just as the situation is about to escalate, the doors burst open. More knights, high-ranking officials rush in, shocked by what they're seeing, and demanding to know what the soldiers think they're doing. A high-ranking official storms into the prison and demands to know what's going on with visible disappointment. The night women freeze instantly, fear written all over their faces. In a rush of excuses, the captain claims they found Shiro wandering the castle courtyard and detained him for questioning. As she speaks, she hurriedly straightens her uniform, trying to regain composure. The official snaps back, shouting, "What questioning? And what about your patrol, you idiots?" She orders them back to their posts immediately. Red-faced with embarrassment, the knights scatter without another word. The official tells Shiro to get dressed. Relief immediately washes over him. Whatever nightmare was about to happen has been stopped. She then calls for someone to enter. A young woman steps inside the chamber. And we learn her identity. She's royalty. Princess Christia. Shiro realizes the girl in front of him is a princess, yet she's standing there in cuffs. He can't understand how someone so important could end up in a place like this. Even so, her presence is striking. She carries herself with a quiet dignity, her beauty almost radiant, her hair catching the light as if it's woven from it. In his thoughts, he concludes that she must normally live the life of a refined noblewoman, the kind of elegance that only comes from royalty. Christia snaps in outrage, demanding how anyone would dare confine her. With a menacing glare, she questions how a member of the royal family could be thrown into a place like this. Watching her, Shiro isn't surprised at all. In his mind, he calmly concludes, she's definitely a feisty one. The high-ranking officer coldly explains to Christia that placing the warrior princess of Regalta under simple house arrest would be disrespectful. They had to take every possible precaution. Christia fires back, insisting the eastern garrison is still standing and that this conflict is far from over. The officer mocks her, asking if she still clings to hope even after the capital has fallen. The words visibly shake Christia, who can't help thinking that none of this would have happened if their general hadn't betrayed them. The officer continues, stating that, Until the execution in 3 days, those cuffs will stay on her, and she'll remain exactly where she is. She adds that if Christia needs anything, she can ask Shiro for assistance, and cruelly suggests she might as well find some comfort in his company while she still can. With that, the door slams shut. Shiro shouts after them in confusion, asking if they're seriously not going to let him out. Christa sinks onto the bench and lets out a heavy sigh, disappointment written all over her face. It's clear she knows things are spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, Shiro can only sit there, staring at her with an awkward, nervous smile. Shiro finally breaks the silence, quietly telling her it looks like she's in a rough situation. The comment makes Christia flinch. He hesitates, then asks what happened to her. She notices how casually he speaks to her, but given that she's already a captive princess, she realizes there's no point clinging to status anymore. Shiro admits he has a few questions. Christia tells him to ask them. His first one is simple. Where are they right now? In a flat, matter-of-fact tone, she answers, they're in a prison. The room falls silent for a few seconds. Christa finally speaks again, explaining that they're in Regalta, the royal capital of the kingdom. She studies him carefully and asks if he might have been brought here from somewhere else. Shiro's mind races. He clenches his fists, struggling to put his thoughts into words. Then, with a determined look, he blurts it out. He's from another world. His words leave the princess completely confused. Shiro quickly spills out the details, introducing himself as Sanada Shiro, a 24-year-old employee trapped in a miserable black company. He explains how his awful boss suddenly ordered a fishing trip, leaving him no choice but to show up half asleep and reluctant. While battling seasickness on the boat, he somehow caught a strange fish, and the next thing he knew, a black portal opened and swallowed him whole, dumping him here. As Shiro finishes explaining his situation, the princess suddenly grabs him and pulls him into a tight hug, overcome with her own despair. The gesture leaves Shiro completely confused and, embarrassingly, a little excited at the same time. She gently tells him that's enough, saying he described that fantasy so vividly it almost sounded real. In a sympathetic tone, she adds that he must have gone through something truly awful to imagine all of that. Her response only confuses Shiro even more. In a world where magic exists, he thought she'd believe him without question. She studies his clothes and politely compliments his outfit, remarking that the Sanada family must be a respectable one. She concludes that it's no wonder the chaos around them would take such a toll on him mentally. Then she pulls him close in a comforting gesture, telling him to stay still and calm down for a moment. Shiro can't help but rethink his first impression. He assumed she'd be hot-tempered, but it turns out she's unexpectedly gentle. The kindness makes him fidget awkwardly. He isn't used to being treated with this kind of soft concern, almost like a child someone is trying to comfort. Christa reassures him that he can relax. She has no intention of doing anything to hurt him. That reassurance makes Shiro relax even more, and without thinking, he leans into her comfort. In his head, he admits he doesn't mind being close to her at all. The warmth is calming in a way he didn't expect, and he finds himself getting carried away by the moment. Lost in thought, he barely notices her voice when she gently asks if something's wrong. Shiro quickly composes himself, scolding his own thoughts. This isn't the time to get carried away. What he needs right now is information, not distractions. He turns back to Princess Christa and asks if there are any men in this country. Since arriving, he hasn't seen a single one. She explains that with the war still ongoing, most of their men are in hiding. Otherwise, she explains, they'd be abducted by Imperial soldiers, just like he was. Shiro asks if that means there are no male soldiers at all. Christa answers plainly, men aren't allowed to serve as soldiers. Seeing his confusion, she gives him a sympathetic look, realizing he truly didn't know. She tells him to listen carefully. In her country, the military is made up entirely of women, and the same is true for their enemy, the Empire of Lurgoa. She goes on to explain that men in this world can't use magic, and compared to women, they're considered physically weaker. In blunt terms, she says men are seen as fragile beings. The statement leaves Shiro even more confused. And then it sinks in if that's true, surviving in this world as someone like him is going to be a serious problem. We're then shown a flashback to Shiro's fishing trip, the one his boss forced him to attend on his only day off. While standing there half-dazed, he suddenly hears a voice, and realizes the flounder he just caught is talking to him. Startled, he lifts the fish, and notices he's the first guest to land a catch. The flounder responds telepathically, calmly telling him it will grant one of his wishes. Shiro starts thinking out loud about what he'd even wish for. Maybe something simple like becoming skilled at crafting, being able to make anything he wants. That actually sounds fun. The flounder suddenly grins and tells him that what he truly desires is creation magic, calling him by name as it says it. The sound of his name freezes Shiro in place. He demands to know how the fish knows who he is, and he tries to ask what creation magic even means. But before he can finish his question, a black hole tears open beneath him, and in an instant, he's pulled inside, transported to another world. That memory snaps us back to the present, right? To the situation Shiro is trapped in now. Princess Christia continues explaining that in this world, men can't use magic and are considered physically weaker than women. In blunt terms, she repeats it, men are seen as fragile beings. Hearing her explanation, Shiro can't help thinking, wait, didn't the flounder give him magic? And he's a man. But the thought is cut short when Princess Christa asks where he came from. Shiro tells her he's from a country called Japan. She asks where that is, and just as he's about to explain, she quickly apologizes. She says it must be hard for him to describe a place she's never heard of, and asks him to forgive her for putting him on the spot. Shiro blinks. So, this is how she sees him. Determined to sound intelligent, he straightens up and gives a formal answer. He explains that Japan is an island nation surrounded by ocean, with a population of roughly 126 million people. He adds that it's an economic powerhouse known for advanced industry, science, and technology. Princess Christa suddenly bursts into laughter, amazed that an island nation could have more than 3 times the population of her entire empire. She calls his story amusing, just like his earlier tale about coming from another world. She assumes he's playing the role of a jester to lift her spirits, and she thanks him for it, apologizing for misunderstanding. But the laughter fades quickly. In a quiet, sad voice, she admits that her execution is only 3 days away, and that she's grateful she gets to spend those final days with him. She then explains his own fate. He won't be killed, but he'll be enslaved, either presented to the nobility as a reward, or sent to the frontier as a pioneer. Shiro suddenly realizes that if the princess can use magic, escaping should be possible. He asks why she doesn't just break out. Christa explains that under normal circumstances, she's one of the top 5 offensive magic users in the entire country. But the cuffs on her wrists are specially designed to seal magic. With them on, she can't even enhance her own strength. Right now, she says, she's no different from an ordinary, powerless person. That's when Shiro's mind starts racing. If they can remove the cuffs, escape might be possible. But outrunning pursuit afterward is another question entirely. Princess Christa quietly apologizes to Shiro, saying his situation is partly her fault. If her kingdom hadn't fallen to the Empire, none of this would have happened to him. Shiro quickly tries to reassure her. He tells her she isn't to blame at all, the real fault lies with the people who captured him, and that cursed flounder. But as he says it, a realization hits him. If he truly has magic, maybe he can help her escape. He turns back to Christa and asks what it takes to use magic, what the rules are, and how it actually works. Princess Christa tells Shiro that the first step to using magic is deep introspection, focusing inward and understanding your own nature. Taking her seriously, Shiro closes his eyes and raises his hands, trying to calm himself and concentrate. In his mind, he calls out to that mysterious flounder, wondering if magic works like a game system. Does he just shout something like, "Status? Open?" Right as the thought crosses his mind, a glowing panel appears in front of him. His sight makes Shiro gasp out loud, startling the princess beside him. Staring at the glowing panel, he sees the words clearly, Level 1, Creation Magic User. That's when it clicks. The flounder hadn't lied to him. He really was given creation magic. He notices the panel even has a search function and wonders if he could create something legendary like a panacea. He pulls it up, and the answer is yes, it's possible. But the cost is absurd. He doesn't have nearly enough level or magic power, and the estimated production time is 247 years. Shiro stares at the number, realizing he'd be long dead before it ever finished. Behind him, Princess Christia calls his name, asking what he's been doing all this time. Shiro excitedly tells Princess Christia to look at this, proudly gesturing toward the glowing panel in front of him. She leans closer and passes her hand straight through it, asking what exactly he wants her to see. That's when Shiro realizes she can't see the panel at all. He hurriedly explains that he can use magic too, which earns him a deeply sympathetic, almost pitying look from her. She pulls him into a gentle, almost maternal hug and speaks softly, telling him to stop saying foolish things. In a pitying tone, she asks how a man could possibly use magic. Holding him close, she says she understands the urge to escape reality, but he needs to pull himself together. She tells Shiro to get some rest, adding that she's going to lie down as well. A moment later, he realizes she's already fallen asleep. Watching her, he can't help thinking how gentle she really is. He quietly pulls away, awkwardly clearing his thoughts, and decides now is the perfect time to examine his magic while he still can. Studying the panel, Shiro realizes that according to the descriptions, the simplest thing he can create right now is water. The production time is listed as 30 minutes, but it looks like that time can shrink as he levels up. Deciding to test it, he raises his hands and closes his eyes. A faint glow gathers around his body as he focuses inward, trying to become aware of his own magic. The sensation feels similar to noticing his own heartbeat, or breathing familiar, but not quite the same. Then it hits him. He doesn't actually know any spells. Maybe he can just trigger it by instinct. He wonders if shouting something like "Activate Creation Magic" would work. And suddenly, a small pop-up appears, displaying the production timer for the water. Shiro watches as the timer begins ticking down. It dawns on him that once the magic is activated, the creation process runs on its own. There's nothing left for him to control. Still thinking it through, his eyes drift across the room, and he notices the mess from earlier is still sitting there. The smell in the room is getting worse, and Shiro starts wondering if there's anything he can use to clean it. His eyes land on a bucket in the corner, and he quickly realizes that's probably their toilet. The thought alone makes him shudder. This place is a breeding ground for disease. If he doesn't act fast, they could easily get sick. He opens his panel again and searches for anything related to medicine, vaccines, antibiotics, anything that might help. He finds penicillin. It's possible to create, but the production time is nearly 47 hours. At least it can be taken orally, so no syringe is needed. He quickly realizes that penicillin isn't realistic right now. He doesn't have the time or the resources. His attention drifts to another option on the panel, golem production. He wonders what it would take to unlock something like that. The smell snaps him back to reality, and he decides that once the water finishes, he'll at least try to clean the place. Maybe he can create a rag or a mop. He checks the panel again. A rag would take 6 hours to produce. Without materials, everything takes forever. With a sigh, he decides he needs a faster solution. He glances over at Princess Christia to make sure she's still asleep. Once he's certain she hasn't stirred, he quietly turns his attention back to his situation, preparing to handle things as discreetly as possible. As Shiro quietly tries to handle the mess, his thoughts spiral. He wonders how he even ended up in a place like this. Back on the fishing boat, there must be chaos by now. Maybe they think he fell overboard. Maybe it's being treated as a maritime accident. He even wonders if insurance would cover something like that. Then his thoughts drift to his parents. They must be worried sick. Will he ever make it back to his own world? Reality snaps back hard. In this ridiculous situation, he's forced to improvise just to clean up, and the absurdity of it all almost makes him laugh. Suddenly, Princess Christia stirs awake. She looks at Shiro and quietly asks if he's crying. Shiro stands there shaking, and he realizes the tears aren't fake, they're coming from real guilt. He can't push down anymore. Seeing this, Princess Christia rushes over and wraps her arms around him from behind, softly murmuring about how gentle he really is. Holding him gently, Princess Christia says in a sorrowful voice that he must have been trying to comfort her, even with her death hanging over everything. Hearing that, Shiro realizes that's how she's interpreted the whole scene. She tells him that if it hurts enough to make him cry, he doesn't need to force himself for her sake. Seizing the moment, Shiro leans into the misunderstanding and quietly insists he's not pushing himself. He just feels sorry for her. Shiro suddenly becomes aware that he's been leaning hard into the cute act, and a wave of embarrassment hits him as he wonders if he overdid it. But judging by the way Princess Christia looks at him, it worked. She finds him genuinely adorable. and that realization secretly makes him proud. Smiling softly, she reassures him that he doesn't need to worry. She has plenty of experience dealing with men, and she reaches up, brushing her hand lightly against his shirt. As she continues fussing over him, Shiro can't help thinking he never imagined a day would come when someone would care for him like this. The warmth of it all feels strangely comforting. She tells him to turn around, and he obeys without thinking. Then she mentions her jacket feels too tight and asks if he could help loosen it. Shiro eagerly agrees. But before he can move, a notification flashes across his panel. The water production is complete, and it asks him to choose where it should appear. The notification sends Shiro into a panic. He frantically taps at the panel, trying to stall the process. The timing couldn't be worse. Completely misreading the situation, Princess Christia gently asks if he's flustered, and tells him there's no reason to be embarrassed. But Shiro barely hears her. His entire focus is locked on the panel, desperately trying to decide where the water should appear. He blurts out that that's not the problem at all, though Christia clearly thinks she understands what's going through his head. She quietly concludes that Shiro is just being modest. Meanwhile, the glowing panel is still frozen in front of him. Misreading his panic, she reassures him that he doesn't have to be shy. Shiro, however, has already given up trying to argue. He hurriedly tells the panel to place the water in the corner right where the mess from earlier was. He suddenly realizes that creating water would normally require a container. After a second thought, he pushes the problem aside and decides to forget the magic for now and focus on the situation in front of him. Looking back at Princess Christia, he can't shake the feeling that her mood has flipped completely, like someone switched her personality in an instant. Sitting together on the bench, she softly compliments Shiro, telling him he did well and that he can call her Chris. She holds him close, her voice gentle. Then she lets out a quiet sigh and murmurs that, at least now, she has no regrets left in this world. Shiro slowly sits up, realizing how close Chris had grown to him in such a short time. The warmth between them lingers, and he can't help but wonder how quickly two people can bond when they're forced to rely on each other. Then the reality crashes back in 3 days, she would be executed. And that was something he absolutely refused to accept. His eyes drift to the cuffs around her wrists. If they could just remove those, he's certain they could change everything. On their second night in the prison, Chris suddenly tells Shiro to step away from the bunk. Before he can ask why, she drives her heel into the corner of the frame. The wood splinters with a sharp crack. She kneels, pulling free a jagged shard from the broken edge, her expression shifting as realization settles in. Watching her do that, Shiro realizes she can still exert terrifying strength even with her magic sealed, and he's left wondering what suddenly came over her. Then Chris calmly tells him her plan: she's going to sever her own wrist. Alright guys, that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed it, I'd really appreciate it if you dropped a like and subscribe to the channel. I've got plenty more manga content coming your way, so stay tuned. See you in the next one.